Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody, back again with Steven. I wanted to share something about our listeners with you because I haven't seen you in a week.
I'm excited.
So, for all of you who don't run a podcast, do a podcast, it's kind of weird to know or to try to figure out how many people actually listen. The details are very nebulous. But what I can see are new locations. In the last week, we've had several new places pop up. And I thought it'd be fun to share our top 5. So whoever's out there from these locations who are new and downloading episodes, and I can't tell if it's one person listening to all 50 or 50 different individuals, but still, I think it's great. So in number 5 spot this week, Vidor, Texas. Number 4, Exeter, New Hampshire. Number 3, I had to look up which state this was in. Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
Number 2, Topeka, Kansas. And number 1, Dresden, Germany.
Really?
I know, it's so cool.
Dresden, Germany.
And they're all over the place, which I just find delightful. So we are certainly a hobby podcast, and I just love that somebody's out there listening.
I do too. And around the world.
I
How
know.
exciting is that?
I thought it was really cool. So these are our new people this week, and I just wanted to tell you, and I figured I'd tell you on here. So to all you out there, though, thank you for listening. I super appreciate it. And if anyone would like a bookmark or a sticker or anything, we have them. They're available. I send them out. So reach out to us if you'd like one, and I'll get it to you. But we have been in monsters and Halloween stories for the last month or so. But we are going to move on from those today. But first, I got a question. In our last episode, you mentioned a Faustian deal. But we did not talk about Faust. Faust himself is not necessarily a monster. So can you use your superpower and give us the short on who is Faust?
Faust is a great story, German in origin. Professor Faust was a brilliant man, but he wanted more, wanted to know more, do more, and experience more. So he made a literal deal with the devil so that he could achieve all his aims in life in exchange for his soul. And there's different versions of the story, but at the end of it, you get to ask the question, was it worth it? So a Faustian bargain is where you can get whatever you want, but at an incredible cost that often makes it not worth it.
Yeah, in the version I've read, I believe he trades his soul for unlimited knowledge and pretty much any worldly pleasure he ever wants. And usually he abuses a girl in some way, and typically she dies. Like you said, there are multiple iterations. I did see one where there's a theory that Faust is Vortigern's son from an incestuous relationship, like an older telling, which maybe it's just because Vortigern was a bad guy. If you want to hear about Vortigern, we talk about him in Merlin a little bit. But that one's fun, I think, just the overlap in stories. But always he does these terrible things in exchange for his soul, for immediate pleasure. And in most of them, he comes to regret it. In some, he's saved, often by the pleading of this girl he's abused. When from heaven, she's praying for him, pleading for him. And in others, he is damned and goes to hell. So depending on the story.
Yeah, it's quite the twist at the end, one way or the other. And I think it's fair to say the most famous telling of it is from the German author Goethe.
Goethe, yeah.
And that tends to be if there is a canon version, that's probably the one I would say is most well known. But I love that there are all those other iterations. That's what makes it fun to me.
And that one has a happy ending, does it not? I think in that one, she pleads for his soul and he goes to heaven in the end.
I think in that one there is a happy ending that doesn't really kind of follow from the rest of the story.
That's true.
It's jarring, as I recall.
Wait,
but
what?
It's been a little while since I've read it, so I might be mixing it up with a different version.
Again, there's multiple iterations of that one, but that is a Faustian deal where you trade your soul for immediate desires. So on that happy note, let's move on from Halloween.
And thank you for doing this book we're going to do today. Listeners, I kind of talked her into this one because I love it, so I'm excited for it.
Well, I believe you mentioned C.S. Lewis in like every episode we do.
Likely.
So this one we're going to do one of his actual stories, but that's the thing. I mean, Narnia itself has a lot of layers and depth to it, but when you get into his other things, I find that they all have so much in that he was so well read and the things he talks about. So anyway, today's story is called The Pilgrim's Regress. So there are a lot of podcasts that I listen to and essays and books on Lewis and analysis of his works, but none that I know of have done this one, which I kind of like, although it is a little overwhelming to do. So I'm glad you're here, brother.
This does follow our pattern of like tackling the stuff that is just really hard when it comes to C.S. Lewis. But that's part of the goal, is to bring to light and to life some of his lesser known works that I think have a tremendous amount of value in them.
Yeah, so this one is actually fairly autobiographical from C.S. Lewis himself. But we'll get to all that and why I think it's difficult in a little bit. First, time for a story.
John grows up in a land ruled over by a mysterious landlord. He learns at a young age about a long list of rules he must keep, the breaking of which will result in him being thrown into a terrible black hole by the landlord. At the same time, he is gifted a vision of a distant and beautiful island, and a yearning for that island never leaves him. Unable to keep the rules, he leaves his home and travels west in search of the island. On his journey, he encounters people of many different beliefs and worldviews. His most frequent companion is one Mr. Virtue, but he also is helped and hampered by many others. Eventually, he is confronted by a great chasm which he cannot pass on his own. In order to proceed any further, he must decide what he really believes about the world and the landlord, and, more importantly, what he is willing to do once he comes to a decision.
So a spoiler alert, because this is very different than the book that inspired it, which is called The Pilgrim's Progress. So that one is about a Christian. The guy's name is Christian because it is an allegory. Everything is symbolic, very clearly symbolic of something specific. And it's his journey towards heaven in The Pilgrim's Progress. I have to tell you the whole title because I was shocked. I've read The Pilgrim's Progress. It is older than this, but it's called The Pilgrim's Progress, From This World to That Which Is to Come, Delivered Under the Similitude of a Dream. It's 19 words long. But it's important to know about our story today, The Pilgrim's Regress. So the twist ending, there is a twist. You should know.
The Pilgrim's Regress also has a longer title. I don't think he hits 19 words, but it's
11. I counted.
The Pilgrim's Regress, an allegorical apology for Christianity, reason, and romanticism.
So this one came out I have 1933. And I believe this is the first book Lewis wrote after his conversion to Christianity, within a couple years after that. So it's really, in a lot of ways, his own journey, but told in story.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely correct. Lewis, from the moment he converted, or very shortly after the moment he converted, he uses the phrase, felt like he should fly one's flag, meaning to announce what he has done, his decision. And so he did that in a couple ways. One way is he started to go to church and people notice, but the other one obviously is the publishing of this work itself. And there's so much about this that I love. The one thing I want to start with is the fact that this is unapologetically an allegory. Listeners will have known we've talked about allegory quite a bit in the past, and we did a little bit of hemming and hawing about what things would qualify as an allegory or not. This one we can be confident. It is an allegory. And people who love Lewis usually love Tolkien as well, and they argue over who's the greatest. And Tolkien famously hated allegory. And so I think most readers of Lewis, too, have this sense that, well, we probably shouldn't really like allegory, because if Tolkien hates it, it must be bad. Lewis didn't hate it. Lewis saw it for an art form that it was, and it was a massive art form in the medieval era and following. And Lewis had read so much of it that it makes sense that he would use an art form that he loved to put it into this tale that he wants to tell.
The things I really love about it are kind of trivia at the beginning and kind of at the end. And everything in between is a little befuddling. And again, we'll talk about why. But he wrote it in 2 weeks.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
It said the first draft he wrote in this rush, this fever, and the quote I have is that he had to get it out of his system. And mine, I have I have the 3rd edition, and on mine, it's really cool because there is a lot of content. Lewis went back through in this edition, and he puts basically a one-line summary at the top of every single page. And they are very helpful. And it's because there's so much content in it. Mm-hmm. He's referencing so many things that he had thought about and read and philosophies. But on these one-line annotations, they're super helpful to help make it clear. Does yours have that?
Mine does not have any of that. So I'm kind of excited to see what you pull out of those as we talk through the book.
They're really good. The titles are good too. And I always love a good title. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that the illustrations were all sketched by his brother, Warney. Mm. So at the beginning of mine, again, we don't have the same book, so we always kind of compare as we chat here. There's a map. Does yours have a map?
Yes, that map has been with it, I think, from the beginning.
It's a map of the world, Mappa Mundi. And when I looked at it, I thought, wow, there's a lot of places on here. And it's not all that long of a book. Fortunately, he doesn't visit all of these places, but he does make a world, and it is a really cool map.
Going back to what you were saying about his writings on the top of the pages, this is something that I have learned about him as a reader. C.S. Lewis just read in ways that I can only ever aspire to. He was such a deep and thorough reader, and he did notes in everything he read. I cannot write in a book. I try, and I can't do it. But I acknowledge this is a weakness in me, not a virtue. The great readers make notes, they underline, they write. And I am told that in Lewis's books, he would do that synopsis thing at the top of books that he was just reading. So that later on he could refer to them easily. And the man would even make his own indexes at the back of the books that he could reference and look through later on. He had a near photographic memory anyway, but then he added that to it. Just what a deep and thorough reader.
Oh, I love that idea of the line at the top, because I do underline a lot, and more than I could just scan through as we talk through these books. A line at the top. Oh, fantastic idea. I will do that.
He's brilliant.
I will say at the top of the map at the beginning is mania. And then kind of off on its own is One Hope.
Yeah, I like One Hope. Yeah, that's a good one.
He doesn't go to those places, but I just like that they're on the map. It's an allegory, so those things mean what they say.
Yes, and that'll become more clear as we go through it. Before we jump in, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the dedication. So we like to read the dedications on books. They can often give us information. And this one in particular is a very, very short, very simple dedication. All it says is to Arthur Greeves. Arthur Greeves was C.S. Lewis's oldest friend, and they were lifelong friends. He met him as a young man. They developed a shared love of Norse literature, and they were pen pals ever since. There are literally hundreds of letters between the two of them. Arthur Greeves lived in Ireland his whole life. C.S. Lewis moved from Ireland to England, but would still go back and visit, and even when everybody else was gone, he would make it a point to try and go back when he could to visit his friend Arthur. They were close friends, and I think that's beautiful. And the fact that this first Christian work is dedicated to him also speaks to the influence Arthur Greeves had on C.S. Lewis's faith, because Arthur Greeves was a believer before C.S. Lewis ever was.
You know, I haven't really heard that. I've heard about Tolkien being part of C.S. Lewis's conversion, but not Arthur Greeves. Did they talk about that, like when Lewis served in the war?
They did, but it was one of those things where I think Arthur's influence was more persistent and patient and gentle and in the background. He wasn't doing these high-level philosophical conversations trying to argue with Jack and talk him into it. He was just being his friend and believed what he believed. I don't think that Arthur Greeves was C.S. Lewis's intellectual rival. I mean, who could be? Tolkien could be.
That's about it.
Owen Barfield could be. Arthur Greeves, not so much. He was just his friend, but he also believed. And some of the things he shared with Lewis that Lewis talks about having learned from him are things like a love of weather, all kinds of weather, even bad weather, a love of place, a love of just a warmth, especially in the early letters of Lewis. I don't know what the scholars think, but as I read through them, Lewis is just a jerk, and you wonder why Arthur Greeves stuck with him. Because Greaves always comes across, not that we have most of his letters, but he comes across so much so much kinder and just there and solid. And so, and Lewis was drawn to that even when he was mean to it. And then for the rest of his life, the two were friends.
Well, I will say I could see that in our friend John here in the Pilgrim's Regress. He's not quite likable as an adolescent, and he's discovering these philosophies. So John actually starts as a child, and the first chapter is called The Rules.
I dreamed of a boy who was born in the land of Puritania, and his name was John. The words in this and the names in this all have meaning and importance, except, frankly, for the name John.
I wonder, too, I had a couple theories. John Bunyan wrote The Pilgrim's Progress.
Mm-hmm. My own theory, and this could be way off, is that it basically is as generic an English name as you can possibly get. There's a reason why we still talk about John Doe, and I think in the English world they use John Smith. When the Doctor from Doctor Who gives a name, he just calls himself John Smith because it's as generic as it's possible to be. I think that's what Lewis is trying to do here, is to give the main character a name that is just absolutely generic.
He's the everyman, because everything else seems to mean something. But here, he's a little boy. And this whole thing very specifically is told from the perspective of a dream. Mm-hmm. And I do think that is an echo of Pilgrim's Progress, where every chapter is like, I dreamed of this boy, and then I dreamed he did this other thing. So it's kind of tucked in there clumsily. Do you think there's a purpose to it?
I do think it's a reference to Pilgrim's Progress. I do think it's a little clumsy, but I also think it's a way of being able to give an omniscient view. And so that way you don't have to tell it from the perspective of John or the other characters. You can give more depth and meaning because you're doing it from this sort of higher level. You're dreaming it, and therefore you can know things in a dream that the characters in a dream wouldn't know. And it gives some freedom too for, frankly, ridiculous things that can't happen in real life. But in a dream, mountains can turn into giants and things like that we're going to see as this book progresses.
So early on, John is a little boy, and at first he gets in trouble. I think he goes into this wood. He's not supposed to go there, and he gets hit. Don't go there anymore. And he says that he was not yet at the age for asking questions. Too little. Quickly he grows up, and he gets in trouble with the cook. I think he's about to kill a bird.
Yeah.
And she yells at him, like, don't kill the birds in the garden. And he asks, why? Because the steward would be very angry, said Cook. Who's the steward, said John. He's the man who makes rules for all the country around here. Why? Said John. Because the landlord set him to do it. Well, who's the landlord? He owns all the country. Why? Said John.
Steward is capitalized, and we are going to learn that is a title. There's the steward of this country, Puritania, but there are also other stewards we're going to meet as the book progresses. Eventually, he's asking so many questions and doing things that can get him into trouble that his parents take him to meet the steward. And I love this passage because the steward is this cheerful, chubby, happy, smiling, friendly guy. But when this boy comes and is brought to be instructed by the steward puts on a mask. He actually puts a mask over his face and starts speaking with a very different voice about the rules and about the landlord. The landlord does not come across well or kind or... In this first scene, the landlord seems very cruel and capricious and arbitrary because John's asking about the rules and why. And essentially the answer he gets is that the landlord owns all this area and it's very kind of him to even let us live here at all. You need to keep these rules, and if you don't, you'll be thrown into a dark pit. It's harsh. It is a bleak picture of existence and reality.
The lessons in it are really interesting, though, because the steward says, I hope you haven't broken any of these rules. Like, they came out of the blue for this kid, and the kid's scared because, like, well, what if I have? And he knows he did. You can see it. Mm-hmm. And the steward takes the mask off and looks at him kindly and says, better tell a lie, old chap. better tell a lie. Better to stuff that down instead of admit it because you broke the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with this fear, but also them pointing out that how kind the landlord is, quite extraordinarily kind and good to his tenants. So this boy is told about all these rules. He's already broken them. You're going to break more. Better lie about it. But he's so kind. But then he's going to throw you in a pit if you break the rules.
I'm just going to read one sentence out of this because I think this is the tongue-in-cheek skill of Lewis in describing this. However, it all ended with pointing out that the landlord was quite extraordinarily kind and good to his tenants, and would certainly torture most of them to death the moment he had the slightest pretext. I mean, that doesn't feel good or kind, but they're speaking this very, very seriously, and they're telling him about these rules. But even then, at the end, the steward takes off the mask and whispers to John, "I shouldn't bother about it all too much if I were you." I mean, there's this idea that there's this veneer that has to be maintained that you're obeying the rules, but really, none of us do. None of us really can. So don't lose too much sleep over it. But you better pretend you're doing it right.
Well, John loses some sleep over it. He says he has little peace either by day or night for thinking of the rules and the black hole full of snakes. At first, he tried very hard to keep them all, but then he finds it hard to keep them all, and then he's kind of ornery about it and breaks as many as he can.
He is conveniently given a copy of the rules to have for his own. And on the front side, there's the list of all the rules. But then on the back, it says the back of the card began like this. Rule 1, put the whole thing out of your head the moment you get into bed. Or Rule 2, unless they saw you do it, keep quiet, or else you'll rue it. I mean, it's this very surface level legalism that we see behind the rules here. Or at least that's the impression John certainly gets out of it.
And it's at this time that he has somewhat of a vision. He goes, and I think it's through the wood, and he sees something. And the annotation at the top of my page says he awakens to sweet desire. And that's capitalized. And I think for good reason, that it's true desire. He sees this vision of an island, and it awakens, it says a sweetness and a pang so piercing, and he wants to go find it. And he goes into the wood where he's not supposed to go. He got smacked for that earlier. But it awakens this dream in him, and this desire to not only see the island, but to feel that sweetness.
Mm-hmm. This is something that is foundational to the way Lewis saw the world and really to how he was converted. When you read through his actual autobiographical material, he talks about this concept of desire, of longing, this pull to something higher, greater, more beautiful that nothing that he's experienced actually corresponds to. And much of his young life and much of what we're going to see here is trying to meet this desire through all these worldly appetites and goals, but they just don't meet it. And so this desire is ever pulling him forward and pulling him onward. And this desire for the island is the great driver for John and the great motivator for his upcoming journeys.
He says, I know now what I want. And this gives him hope for a time, because he has felt this sweetness, this beauty, this kind of heartbreaking goodness. But it took me very much to mere Christianity. And he talks in there about we are given desires, and if they can't be satisfied here, there's good reason for that. It means they can't be satisfied here because they're to be satisfied in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But they're placed in us because we are built for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what this is hinting at. But John's still little. He doesn't understand any of that. He just got this glimpse, and he liked it. He knew that was good.
Mm-hmm. And he wants something. That, I think, is such a key point in human life. And this is, we're talking about these first opening chapters here. This is a great example of what this book does. This book, I think, would be a phenomenal book club book. Now, we've talked about that we don't really do book clubs, but this is one that you could spend hours on each of these chapters, dissecting and moving through it and pulling other nuggets out and having it lead you to other discussion points. And we're going to hit these first chapters pretty hard, and then several of these others we're going to have to go through quite a bit faster. But I think it's really the magic of this book. And going back to this idea of wanting something, how many people have you met in your life that just don't seem to want anything? They've got no goal, no purpose. It's just all about existing. It's just being where you are. The idea of somebody actually wanting something, I think many people would envy that somebody knows what they want. That's rare. And I think we see how that desire can be used, frankly, by God to bring us to himself.
It's what propels John through this book, because initially he's kind of upset at the idea of this landlord he's kind of a tyrant. I mean, this is, in essence, legalistic Christianity. Mm-hmm. Here's the rules, follow them.
I mean, the land is named Puritania. I mean, it's not subtle.
No. In this next chapter, because he is still pretty young here, he has an uncle, Uncle George. He got notice to quit. This is the equivalent of death. John sees death in his family. His Uncle George, it's the equivalent of his Uncle George dying. And his uncle is scared.
Mm-hmm. He is described as a disreputable fellow, but he's one of the family, and he's scared. But the steward talks to him and says, well, you knew this was coming. We can all be given notice at any time. And John asks questions about that. He says, well, can we give notice to leave? And they're like, no. It's the landlord who gives the notice. And again, the power is all one-sided, and John doesn't think that's fair or think that's right. And George ends up having to cross a brook to go into the eastern mountains to where the landlord lives. And the steward tries to comfort him, saying, well, don't you know the landlord is going to bring you to him to a nicer place? That's why you're leaving here. But George doesn't believe it, and no one else seems to believe it, and no one can see this nicer place. All they see is this flat, bleak land on the other side of the brook that Uncle George is going to. And the masks come back, because not only is the steward wearing a mask, but everyone puts on a mask, including Uncle George. But he can't keep his on because he's crying and shaking so hard. And this is uncomfortable for people to see that kind of suffering, because he's supposed to just wear the mask and you're not supposed to see the pain. And John is absorbing all this. And it's really kind of a gut punch, because after George leaves, the family talks about, oh, he had some really nice pigs, didn't he? Oh, we should go look at those. I mean, and they move on from George very quickly and move towards George's stuff that is now their stuff.
Except for John. John's asking questions. He's still little. He's at the age of asking questions. And he's asking about the landlord. Is he going to be angry? Would he put us in the black hole, if we tried to turn in notice right away? And he asks, will the landlord put Uncle George in the black hole? And they yell at him. How dare you say such a thing about your poor uncle? And he's like, but hasn't Uncle George broken all the rules? Broken all the rules? Your Uncle George was a very good man. And John says, you never told me that before. Mm-hmm. This is news to him. He broke all the rules, and he was told, you break all the rules, you're going in the black hole. It's a scary time.
Very, very scary. One of the things that we had talked about doing on our last episode that I had forgotten to do at the beginning of this one is an age recommendation. This one, I would say at least high school, if not a little bit older. I don't think you're really going to understand this in a lot of ways unless you're much older and have read a lot widely yourself, because he throws out references you're not going to recommend. He's also very vulnerable and honest in this and talks about some physical things. So we're going to get into some chapters where he talks about lust. And so this is not a book that I would target towards anyone, again, certainly younger than high school, and maybe even college age would probably be the best time to approach this for the first time. And so with that, the next chapter title is Leah for Rachel.
It's a really good title. It's a reference to the Old Testament. But at this time, John is growing up, and it says his chief pleasure is to go down the road and look through the window in the wall in the hope of seeing the beautiful island. He doesn't see it all the time, and it gets fuzzier. It's a lot more rare for him to even see it, let alone have that deep feeling of goodness about it. But he keeps going in the wood. He says, I would break every rule on the card I would go down into the black hole forever if it had a window from which I could see the island. He still has this desire, but it's not going anywhere. He's not changing.
So in this wood, he's looking around for this thing he wants when he sees something else that excites him. He sees a young girl about his age, and she's not wearing any clothes. And this girl turns to him and says, "It was me you wanted," said the brown girl. "I am better than your silly islands." And John rose and caught her all in haste and committed fornication with her in the wood. So we have John growing up, John experiencing lusts, and John turning to something that he thinks will satisfy his desire. And I do want to talk a little bit about some of the terminology C.S. Lewis uses. There are people who cannot read this book without just assuming C.S. Lewis is a wild racist, because this is a brown girl, is the word that gets described to her. I would point out that I don't think that's the way he means it. I think he's using color more on that scale from white being pure good and black being evil, not in terms of skin tone, but of the standard kind of white to black, like if you had a white piece of paper. If it's black, it's not white anymore, sort of thing. And so the dingier it gets, the closer it gets to black. I think this has more to do with that kind of medieval concept of purity. Now, there are those who will apply that to skin tones, but I don't think that's really what he's going for here. I also, as we read more, will learn that she's not human. She's not actually a person. And I think there's some of the reference to the Scottish brownies, right? The fairies and the folk like that who would be a brown girl in the woods. So I have never taken this as a particularly racist thing. I can see how people go there and get there, but I think what he's trying to speak through this has some merit and some value.
It did stick out to me immediately. Like, oh, that doesn't seem like Lewis at all. Like, I've never read racism in his other works or felt that at all. So I did. I went and read things from smarter people than me. And they took it very much as earth and soil.
Yeah.
And so instead of a brown girl, in my mind, because I find it uncomfortable to call it that, but he uses colors later in terms of blue and green as like reason and purity, very earthly in sense of brown, where it's a different kind of desire. This is lust. This is not the sweet desire, the looking out toward the island and the blue calm water. This is of the earth. It's a lot more fleshly. And John is part of it. If she is broken, so is he. He is full willing in this. Yeah. And it continues over and over. I mean, it is a vulnerable thing for Lewis to share. I don't think that you can read this and say, oh, every single one of these mistakes he made. This one, it seems like he did.
Yeah. And the next chapter
title... And was ashamed of it.
Yes, absolutely. The next chapter title, I think, speaks more to that concept, exactly that shame, because the chapter title is Ichabod. And for scholars of the Old Testament, we know that means the glory has gone out. This was the word that was spoken and the name given to the child when the glory of God left the temple, when the actual presence of God left the people of Israel. And so what he's saying here, after the chapter of Leah for Rachel, because what's that reference to? As you said, that's from the Old Testament as well. That is where Jacob works 7 years because he loves Rachel. And then on the night where he thinks he's going to get the object of his desire, his uncle Laban switches Leah instead, and he has to work even more in order to get Rachel. And so we see a switch here. We see him thinking he's attaining an object of his desire, but he's really getting a secondhand copy that doesn't satisfy. And then as the glory leaves, he becomes depressed. And even this thing that initially was fun just eats away at his soul, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. He doesn't want to have anything to do with this woman.
It says, John was not happy. And first of all, the weight of all the rules that he had broken descended upon him, for he was going daily into the wood, and he had almost forgotten the landlord. And then there's this burden of these girls who, it's not just that he seeks them now, they follow him around, and he feels too weak to resist.
Yeah, the first girl asks him when he says he's going to leave. She says, well, okay, but you have to take your children with you. Did you think I was barren? And so this is a wonderful description or example of how sin begets sin. right? How evil begets evil, how you indulge in one thing and all of a sudden the darkness grows and it hangs on you and eats at you and becomes a part of you, which again takes us though into this next chapter. And I love the chapter titles because the next one is wonderful and it's Latin. It says, Quem caritas in sepulchro non est hic, which is, who are you searching for in the grave? He is not here. Which is, of course, a reference to our Lord and his rising. And so he just does this in 3 chapter titles. He does this fantastic movement and passage from desired that is frustrated to the depression and the glory leaving to resurrection. It's an amazing sequence he does very quickly right here.
But he goes low before that sweet desires resumes. He's reached the bottom of misery, but the title at the top of mine says sweet desire returns, and that's that vision of the island. And there's a word and sweet music, and he hears a voice say, "Come." And so he resolves to make this the object of his life. He will find the island if it can be found, and he sets his face to the west to seek for the island.
Mm-hmm. And he begins his journey. And this whole work is broken up into books and chapters. And this is the end of book 1. And now we move into the next section, the second book, which is titled Thrill. So he's going to the land of thrills. Now, he's already had some experience with pleasure, and that didn't go well for him. Now he's going into the land of thrills. And again, the chapter titles. And this is what he does with this work. He throws out these passages. Of course, being C.S. Lewis, he doesn't bother to translate them. So if you don't know what they mean, they just run by you. But if you know what they mean, it taps into this great wealth and well and history of literature and religion and philosophy and theology. So the next chapter title is Dixit Incipiens, which is The Fool Says. And this comes from the Psalm passage, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And this begins his journey out of the land of Puritania.
At the beginning of each of these books, these sections, there are so many poems and excerpts that he puts in here. So just at the beginning of this one, he quotes Exodus, Plato, Dante, and Spencer. And they're all great. And they're all related to this next little section. And he puts so many things. And that's why I find this book hard. And it's exactly why Lewis went back through and added these edits and annotations at the top. He was so well read, so thoughtful. He wrote it for people who'd read all the same things as him. There's nobody like that. So even very well-read people struggle with this book because there's so many references either inferred or specifically stated in it. He calls that out, actually, to know the breadth of thought that he put into all these things. And in retrospect, looking back on his life after he'd converted to Christianity and could kind of parse out these different philosophies that had impacted him, he had participated in, and he had made choices in and around them or tried to substitute them for that good desire, that sweet desire, that sweet music he was longing for. I mean, it's amazing.
And he had done all this reading and thinking by the time he was 35. He was born in 1898. This book was published in 33. And he had this at his fingertips. It is awe-inspiring. And we've talked before about a lot of his books, or a lot of the books we do on this show are in a hope that people will say, oh, I can read that. And they'll pick it up and take it and enjoy it. This one, I'm not so much trying to get people to read, but I'm trying to get people to understand why those of us who do read it love it. And for people who have read widely and deeply, it's like this massive puzzle. It's this game where it's like, oh, I recognize that. I recognize that. And then you'll come to a line or a phrase you don't recognize, and you'll want to go find out where it came from. And so that's fun. But we are now journeying. And as he is journeying along, he goes to an inn, and he meets a man at the inn, the friendly and cheerful and kind Mr. Enlightenment. I love this because the Enlightenment, of course, is a period and a philosophy that really took the world, certainly the West, by storm. And we are still in a post-Enlightenment age. It touches what we do now. He meets this guy in the inn, and Mr. Enlightenment offers to take him with him to his home of Claptrap. Now, again, the names are not subtle in this book once you know what they mean. But he has a wonderful time journeying with Mr. Enlightenment, who is so kind and so warm. And he tells John what John is dying to hear. There is no landlord. He was made up by the stewards. There's no black hole. We've moved past that. Science has moved past that.
John asks him, how do you know there is no landlord? And Mr. Enlightenment yells out, Christopher Columbus, Galileo, the earth is round, invention of printing, gunpowder. Sounds like, what?
And that's it. He just shouts that at him. There's no argument here. Mr. Enlightenment is not making an argument. He's just throwing out these facts as if that should carry the day. But it's enough for John, because John does not want to believe in the landlord. He feels great about this, and this is enlightening and heartening to him.
He uses examples of evolution and comparative religion. The inductive method and hypothesis is a character. I mean, there's these wonderful references, but he basically gives John the out. There's no landlord. No need to worry. No need to follow any rules.
John wisely, though, decides he doesn't really want to go visit Claptrap. So he decides to stay on the main road for a while longer, but he thanks the man, and away rides Mr. Enlightenment in his cart, and John goes walking along the road. And as John is walking on the road, he meets another man, and this is a really important meeting. He meets somebody named Mr. Virtue. And I love this because it's the Middle English spelling. It's Vertue. But he's meeting Virtue. And Virtue is walking along the same road that John is.
I like how he tells it from the perspective of the dream. So this is the man dreaming. He says, now I knew in my dream that this man's name was Mr. Virtue. And he was about of an age with John, or a little older. So I guess that is the use of the omniscient narrator. He can see it all happening.
Yeah. And again, I'm not going to go into every little thing on this because we will never finish if I do, but this is an example of a little thing he puts in here. So John asks him, what is the name of this place? And Mr. Virtue responds, it is called Jehovah Jireh. So Jehovah Jireh in the King James translation of the Bible translates to the Lord will provide, or God will provide. And here we have John meeting with Virtue on this hill. Now, Virtue in some ways seems farther along than John, but he also seems on a very different quest. Virtue is not looking for an island. He doesn't know if there is an island. He also doesn't know if there's a landlord. What Virtue is doing is moving and making his own choices. And we see in this first chapter that Virtue has his own moral code, and he's tough. He sticks by it.
He's going to walk 30 miles a day. Doesn't really matter where, which direction, you just must keep walking. And he's got all these ideas about the rules, but they have to come from him. Mm-hmm. He is not to be put under anyone else's thumb, but he must comply with his own mind. It's an interesting way to describe Virtue, I think, where he doesn't get value out of it, but he is compelled to act on it.
It is a very stern, it's doing the right thing and believing strongly in doing the right thing, but it's hard to pin down a motive other than choice, that I am choosing to do this for my own reasons. As the journey continues, the two of them meet up with another lady. Women keep showing up in this book. And this is Media Halfways. She invites John to go home with her to meet her father, because John is talking about the island, and she says, well, my father sings of something that's sort of like the island. Come with me. Virtue, he's on the road. He's not leaving. But John, he's willing to do a little side quest, and so he parts ways with Virtue, and he follows Media Halfways.
And here, it's kind of an odd compromise, because he's walking along with this woman, and they're bonding, they're getting together, they draw close, and John says, this is what I've been looking for all my life. The brown girls, the broken girls were too gross, and the island was too fine. He's somewhere in the middle. He says, this is real, and Media says, this is love. This is the way to the real island. It looks right. And I think here is where this idea of romanticism, which I know there are many definitions on that, but I think C.S. Lewis's idea of romanticism kind of kicks in, where it's this draw of something that looks and sounds beautiful.
Yeah. The other word I would throw in here is aestheticism, or the aesthete movement. The idea of beauty for beauty's sake, the idea of something wonderful, which was very attractive to many people, including C.S. Lewis. And we move into the next chapter, which is again named Leah for Rachel. We've seen this pattern already of a desire replaced by something that won't satisfy. And as he goes into the house of old Mr. Halfways, we're going to see this pattern produce itself again, because Mr. Halfways is a singer. And he sings a song that brings to John a vision of the island, almost as close as when he could see the island before. And at first, he even thinks he likes it a little better. And he has Mr. Halfways continue to sing the song. And as he's singing, there's parts about it he likes, parts he doesn't like, but he's also got this girl there with him, and he likes that. And so the two of them get more and more intimate as this song is going on. And Mr. Halfways ends up leaving them saying, "You have found your island. You have found it in one another's hearts," as if the love between these two, or the purported love, was really what the island was all along. And so Mr. Halfways walks out, and the two are together. And again, the pattern continues, because the next chapter, it's short, but it's called Ichabod. Again, the glory has gone out. So we have this substitution. Media Halfways is not the island and can never be the island. And then the glory gone out is where we see the fall here, because somebody else shows up and just ruins the whole thing. He starts insulting Media, and she throws an absolute fit and then leaves. And John is stuck now with Mr. Halfway's other child, the young Gus Halfways.
Yeah, this is her brother, and it's interesting when he walks in and disrupts the whole thing. He wrecks it all. He calls her Brownie. At your tricks again. So he has surpassed his father and his sister in his thinking, in his mind. He knows what's right. And yet the next chapter is called Non Est Hic.
He is not here.
It's this looping cycle where he thought he found this beautiful thing, but it didn't satisfy. And he thought he found the right girl, but that didn't satisfy either. And then he is not here. Still doesn't satisfy.
Mr. Halfways has ideas, though. This is, again, the young Mr. Halfways. He doesn't live there with his father. He's just visiting. He lives in the wonderful city of Escropolis.
What does that mean?
The ugly city. I believe the esque at the beginning is the root of excrement. So this is not a pleasant place to go, but this is where he lives. And one gets the sense that is very modern, because as I love that his name is Gus Halfways, he offers John a ride to go there. And remember, this is 1933, and who knows when the story was supposed to have happened, but Gus has a car. He's got a machine on wheels to take him to this ugly city of steel and metal and darkness. But he promises him that if he goes with him, he's going to get some real poetry.
So this next book is called Through Darkest Zeitgeistheim. Can't even say it. Zeitgeistheim. What is Zeitgeist?
Zeitgeist is the spirit of the age.
And here Lewis quotes Thucydides, an anonymous poem, Shaw. Oh, only 3. I thought there were 4 more. Sorry.
Only 3. He's slowing down.
Slowing down.
Yeah.
The breadth of them, though, is amazing. I cannot believe just the collection of writings related to what he's writing he includes in this.
Yeah. And I do feel like there's a lot that I can pick out of this now, but I also get the sense there's so much that is going right over my head that if I were smarter, I would be laughing a lot through a bunch of this, especially these next kind of 3 vignettes, because when he gets to Escropolis, he gets introduced to some poets and 3 very different forms of poetry. And I have no doubt that these line up meter and syllable and punctuation with actual movements and poets that C.S. Lewis has read, but each one tells something different and something interesting, and they all refer to themselves as the clevers, right? These are the smart ones that understand poetry. But let's look at the poetry they do. The first one is a woman who is defined by her courage. She's dressed up like a steward, but it looks all kind of off. She's even wearing a mask that's sort of like a steward. And she does this poetry that John just doesn't like. And she comes out in a rage. She slaps him for persecuting her, and how her poetry is all honest and courageous. And that's the first poet.
She says, "You will always follow the cry of the majority, but I will fight to the end. So there." And she began to cry. He says, "I'm extremely sorry." He doesn't know what he did. But he asked Gus at some point, like, "Why are they all so angry?" And Gus is like, no, they're not angry. It's art. But they do. They all seem very angry, and then they get upset. One of the clevers will storm off, and then the rest have like this, quite like kind of conversation afterwards.
Well, the second poet is full on erotic pornography. I mean, they don't even try to be anything else. But then he is horribly insulted when John points this out, even mildly, and they start shouting names at him, calling him, "You're obviously a Puritan," for seeing this. And then the last one is so sad. It's a woman who had an injury as a child and can't speak, so she can only speak total nonsense. I believe they call her Glugly because her poetry, I'll just read it. Global, obel, oogle, ogle, global, gloogle, glue. I mean, it's just nonsense, and John can't understand any of it, and they all come down on him. They all come after him for not understanding. They cry out after him as they're chasing him out of the hall. Puritanian, bourgeois, prurient. And so the criticism of him is really, really heavy, and he's running for his life.
Lewis annotates it as the poetry, this whole section, the poetry of the silly 20s. And at the end, it says he abandons this movement, though he's a little damaged by it. Like this had an impact clearly on Lewis, where this was art and he tried to participate, but got booted out of it and it hurt him. Yeah. He put something of himself into it and it hurt him seemingly.
As John is running, he meets somebody, and he is at first hopeful he might get some assistance, but that hope gets dashed really quick. This guy is not interested in helping him at all, but they do have a little bit of a conversation. And again, nothing subtle here. This guy's name is Mr. Mammon. So this is wealth, money, and it turns out he owns this ugly city. They all work for him, and he drives John away. He is not going to help him as John is running away. John just wants to get out of here, and so he keeps running, but he's not going to get out.
Well, he ends up going up this pass, and he's actually arrested. There's guards at this pass, and he's taken under arrest. And all he's trying to do is get to this island. He's trying to go west and find this island, and he keeps meeting people on these obstructions. It says, "You cannot pass. By whose orders? Do you not know that all this country belongs to the spirit of the age?" He's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I have no wish to trespass. I'll go around." And they won't let him. They're like, "Nope, you're in it."
Yeah, they say anyone can come in. It's illegal to leave. So it's the fact that he wants to go. And then the person who arrests him is interesting. The guard shouts, "Here, enlightenment, take this fugitive to our master." So it's actually enlightenment that comes and arrests him. But he doesn't look like the kind, jovial, friendly Mr. Enlightenment that John got the ride with earlier. And he asks him, he says, "Do I know you? You don't look the same." And young Enlightenment is just appalled. He says, "No, that's my father you met. We have moved on and grown past that. And now this is the spirit of the age that they all serve."
His name is Sigismund Enlightenment. That's Mr. Enlightenment's son. So this is clearly attributed to Freud. And they're talking about his island. They're like, "Is that like an imagination?" Yes. They tell him, "The island was the pretense that you put up to conceal your own lusts from yourself." But he says, "Maybe, but I was disappointed. I wasn't satisfied with that. I'm looking for the real thing."
And they don't think the real thing exists, or they certainly tell him it doesn't exist, that's all just wish fulfillment. So you wanted to sleep with girls, and therefore you came up with this island as a higher form of that, or a different form of that. And they make the argument, young Mr. Enlightened makes the argument, and this passage is really well done, because he says, yeah, you can't even see reality. You can't see what's in front of you. He says, you probably think that's a big rock, don't you? And John looks up at what he thought was a big mountain, a big rock, and he is horrified to discover that it is a giant. And this is their master. This giant is the spirit of the age. And it gets darker, because as John gets thrown in prison, says, he will open his eyes presently, said Mr. Enlightenment. Then he locked the door and left John in prison.
At first he has his eyes closed. As he opens them later, he wants to breathe some air, get some fresh air. He learns that whatever the giant looks at becomes transparent. You can see straight through it. Here, John looks around and he can see other prisoners, and he sees their insides. And the annotation here, because it's better than I can do, he says John sees all humanity as bundles of complexes. They're ugly to him. He sees all the mess inside. They become less than human because he just sees the brokenness and the internal workings of these people.
Yeah, I mean, intestines squeezing like a bunch of snakes, blood pumping through like a horrible machine. He sees one poor man with cancer, and he can see the cancer eating him up inside. And it says that then he drops his head to try to not see these others, but that only means he sees his own inside. All these dark and ugly and just brutal, these brute facts going on inside these bodies. And the way this ends is really interesting. The end of this chapter, where it says, John looked around on it all, and suddenly he fell on his face and thrust his hand into his eyes and cried out, "It is the black hole. There may be no landlord, but it is true about the black hole. I am mad. I am dead. I am in hell forever." What a bleak place to be, where you can't even hope in a landlord, but the black hole is there. You have no God to turn to, but you are in hell. It is a hard, hard place to be. This focus on facts continues during his imprisonment. So the jailer will come and will give them food, but he'll describe things about it. He'll talk about, this coming from a cow. He'll talk about, butchery and meat. I mean, it basically strips everything down to its sort of darkest and brutest and real reality. And John is kind of relieved at first, because he says, well, you guys are idiots. Surely, there's a difference between, milk from a cow versus other fluids from a cow. And the jailer's like, why? Why would they be different? And then there are other prisoners that have been taught this twisted catechism, this parroting of the spirit of the age. And so he asks one little boy all these questions, and he gets all these pat responses back. I mean, for example, he asked the question, what is the answer to an argument turning on the belief that 2 and 2 make 4? The answer is, you say that because you are a mathematician. They've got an answer for everything. They've got a way for breaking down anything true, anything good, or anything beautiful. But John is not happy with all this. He keeps talking, and he gets lined up for some punishment.
This next chapter is called The Giant Slayer. A lot of this is pretty bleak, especially early on, because he's trying to figure out a path, and he keeps getting in trouble because he doesn't understand what's happening. He's just looking for this island. But here, a woman shows up, and I believe she's wearing... what is it, blue or green?
Blue, and this is so important.
So John is about to be sentenced, in essence, and this great black stallion rides up, and there's seated a figure wound in a cloak of blue, which was hooded over the head and came down, concealing the face. And they think it's another person to arrest. Great.
But to those of us who know literature, particularly Norse literature, there's another character that often shows up as a stranger garbed in blue. This is an Odin reference. Keep going. It's great.
A female Odin.
Yeah.
It says, who are you? And she says, my name is Reason, with a capital R. Her name is Reason. And the giant is speaking directly to her. Make out her passport quickly. She's allowed to go through. Let her go through our dominions and be off with all the speed she wishes. He doesn't want to mess with Reason. And she says, not yet. I will ask you 3 riddles before I go for a wager. The giant asks, what is the pledge? Your head.
This is totally an Odinic story, because Odin, as the wanderer, the traveler, the seeker, and the giver of knowledge, is always doing this, where he's entering into these riddle competitions and strange halls, and it's always to the death. It's always for the head. Well, maybe not always, but it sure feels like it in the stories. And so this is the presence of reason. This is reason coming to do battle with the spirit of the age. And I love the layers he puts in this, because you're right. Odin is a dude. This is a woman. So it's not just an Odin reference. We also have an Athena reference here. So this is the virgin goddess of wisdom, or of reason. So this is both Odin, this is Athena, this is a combination of these great characters throughout literature and history.
Well, she asked the giant 3 riddles, and I really wanted to get one. I did not.
Me neither.
Fortunately, she answers them later, but I just want to read the riddles because they're cool. This is my first riddle, said Reason. What is the color of things in dark places, a fish in the depth of the sea, or of the entrails in the body of a man?
I cannot say, said the giant.
Well, said Reason, now hear my second riddle. There was a certain man who was going to his own house, and his enemy went with him. And his house was beyond a river too swift to swim and too deep to wade. And he could go no faster than his enemy. While he was on his journey, his wife sent to him and said, You know that there is only one bridge across the river. Tell me, shall I destroy it that the enemy may not cross? Or shall I leave it standing that you may cross? What should this man do?
It is too hard for me, said the giant.
Well, said Reason, try now to answer my third riddle. By what rule do you tell a copy from an original?
The giant muttered and mumbled and could not answer, and Reason set spurs in her stallion, and it leaped up on the giant's mossy knees and galloped up his foreleg, till she plunged her sword into his heart. Then there was a noise and a crumbling like a landslide, and the huge carcass settled down, and the spirit of the age became what he had seemed to be at first, a sprawling hummock of rock.
He had no reason.
It is a great scene. And you're right, it has been bleak up to this point, but now there is a hero. There is something that can be relied on to fight against just this inanity that we've been presented with thus far. And this is so in flavor of what Jack Lewis loved, the idea of reason and applying his reason to come to truth.
And I think it's important that it is a woman, because so far women have not helped John, nor has he helped them. They've only been to his trouble so far. They haven't taught him anything. He hasn't learned anything from a woman and very little from a man. This is the first person, really, that he starts to learn something of value from.
Mm-hmm. And that moves us into book 4, Back on the Road. And John is going to journey with Reason for at least a little while. But first, they're going to go back to the prison and try to save people. And again, chapter titles. This one is Let Grill Be Grill. I had to look this one up. I couldn't catch this one. This is a reference from the Fairy Queen. And the way the quote is, it basically implies that there are some people that are beyond redemption. There are some people that just can't be saved no matter what you do for them. And we see this with the other prisoners, because they go back now that the giant is dead, but those prisoners won't be fooled again and won't come out, and they won't follow reason. And so they remain in prison.
They say it is one more wish fulfillment dream. They're not interested. The caption from Lewis is, but those who have been Freudianized too long are incurable. They can't see past it. It all fits inside this rationalization, this wish fulfillment idea. Like, that's just another one. And Reason basically says that we can't save them. And John asks if he can go with her. You may come until you are tired, said Reason.
And you can see reading this how you could get tired over these next few chapters.
Oh, it gives him a headache.
Yeah, we're going to launch into some fairly heavy philosophy here. And we're probably not going to touch too deep on most of this.
No, just the answers to the riddles, because they're cool.
But, well, so the first one is actually the archetype and ectype is the name of the chapter. So archetype is the original, ectype is the copy. And remember, the question was, how can you tell a copy from an original? I hope you can help me on this, because I read this chapter several times, and I don't think she ever answers the question. How do you tell the copy from the original?
Well, now I got to look. Hang on. There's too many words in this book.
Well, while we're trying to find that, there are some questions John asks of Reason. He asks her, does the island exist? And she tells him something fascinating. She says, I cannot tell you that because you do not know. She can only tell him, help him face what he knows himself. She asks things about good and bad things, right? Right and wrong, evil and goodness. And she says, I have nothing to tell you of good and bad. So she is pure reason, pure knowledge and sorting through and working things out.
I think the answer to the copy from the original, it has to do with this line. She says, some have thought that all these loves were copies of our love for the landlord, because she talks about copies of copies of copies.
Mm-hmm.
The love of the landlord is the only one that could be original because it's big enough. It's all encompassing. She doesn't stipulate it specifically because she also references her sisters, philosophy and theology. But there has to be an unmoved mover. The start of something, there has to be an original to copy in the first place. So you have to go basically follow the path back to the original.
I think that's true. I'm not sure she explains that in this. I don't know that it's answered. The closest I was able to come thinking through kind of the corpus of his works was from Mere Christianity, where he talks about deviations, right? How can you tell when something is deviated? And he says basically you can explain a deviation by comparing it to the original, but you can't explain an original by comparing it to a deviation. And so I guess that sort of says a similar concept, that the archetype has to include all things within it. I mean, so you can explain kind of the love of the women based off of the idea that he has this love of the island and that's a lesser thing. But you can't explain the love of the island because that's a greater thing from the love of the women, which is a lesser thing, is the nearest I could come to on it.
But no, she does not strictly specify. She's not really into giving clear answers.
She does say that for some of those other questions, for things like good and bad and right and wrong, that he really needs to go to her younger sisters. And her younger sisters are philosophy and theology. And I think that's fun.
Before he leaves her, he asks more questions, though. They have a lot of chat. Mm-hmm. He's talking about the people in the prison where he could see their insides, and it was so horrible to him. And she asked him, did you think that the things you saw in the dungeon were real? That we really are like that? He says, of course I did. It is only our skin that hides them. And she says, then I must ask you the same question that I asked the giant. That first riddle, what is the color of things in the dark? I suppose no color at all. There just has no color. There are no shapes. There's nothing in the dark. You can't see it.
And this goes back to the chapter title, Esse is percipi. This is a very famous Latin phrase, which means to be is to be perceived. And this comes from a very famous philosopher named Berkeley. Most people have heard of Berkeley through the question, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And Berkeley's answer was no, because a sound by definition is something perceived. And so if there's no one to hear it, there's no sound. There's noise, sure, there's activity that happens, but there can't be sound without a perceiver. And I think this is the argument he's making for the color of the entrails inside the human body. If they can't be seen in that way and in that light, then they don't have a color. And so that's not actually reality. And John points out, well, if I cut open a body, they would be there and they'd look like that. And she points out, well, that's no longer a living body. So that's not a real thing. The things they're asking you to believe there were all unreal, but you were willing to believe them. The real things, those are much harder.
She describes some of them, and I like this. Because John is unconvinced. He's like, I don't know that I get it. But she's talking about the giant. He showed you something that is not, but something that would be if the world were made all other than it is. But in the real world, our inwards are invisible. They are not colored shapes at all. They are feelings. The warmth in your limbs at this moment, the sweetness of your breath as you draw it in, the comfort in your belly because we breakfasted well, and your hunger for the next meal. These are the reality. All the sponges and tubes that you saw in the dungeon, they're the lie. I think it's a lot more holistic look at what makes a person a person. We are more than the sum of our parts.
I think so too. But there is value, though, to looking within as well, because at the end he says, oh, well, then I really am clean. I am not like those. And Reason smiled. There, too, she said, there is truth mixed up with the giant's conjuring tricks. It will do you no harm to remember from time to time the ugly sights inside. You come of a race that cannot afford to be proud. And I think that's a great line.
We are both.
All right. Well, we've got 2 of the riddles. He's getting tired already at this point, but they talk through the third little riddle. And this one I think is a little bit more complicated. It's the riddle of the bridges. I think the idea behind the riddle of the bridges, to make it fairly simple, is that essentially the spirit of the age, these people are trying to use the same argument both ways. They're trying to use it to say that the island's a wish fulfillment of John, but the things they want, like the absence of the landlord, they're trying to pretend that's not a wish fulfillment on their part. And so that's the idea behind the destroying of the bridge, right? Do you destroy the bridge, in which case you can't use it as an argument that there's no landlord, but you also can't use it as the argument that there is a landlord? Or do you leave the bridge up, in which case you can use an argument in both directions? So it's basically trying to use an argument both ways, which can't be done. And again, it's complicated, and John, by this point, is tired.
I'm with John. This hurt my head. I'm like, oh man, I'm tired. He has to leave. He decides to stop reasoning at this point. I think there comes a point where you've thought too much about hard things, where you go in these circles, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go now. And she directs him like, I'd go left if I were you.
She's kind. She turns him back to the main road. And on the main road, I'm very excited because John meets back up with Mr. Virtue, who has been walking and trudging along this whole time. But they've gone by very different roads. Virtue has gone by a very difficult, hard road. John assumed he would be way ahead of him because he doesn't in prison, but Virtue describes these great, great high cliffs he had to go through, whereas John, when all was said and done, ended up working his way through a pass. And so they got to this point at the same time. But then they come up to the Grand Canyon.
The caption I'm going to read to you. John decides to live virtuously, but at once meets an obstacle. It's this insurpassable canyon. You cannot cross this thing.
And I wonder about this because I'm an American and I hear the Grand Canyon. We've got one. There is a Grand Canyon. I wonder if C.S. Lewis was thinking about that or if he just meant a really big canyon. So we have met a lot of people that have been harmful and problematic for John, but we've met Virtue, who has so far been kind of neutral. We have now met Lady Reason, who has been very helpful and saved John from his imprisonment. And now we meet another character who's going to be important. We meet Mother Kirk.
I like this caption. It says, conscience. John's own conscience tells him that he can and must pass this canyon by his own efforts. And then they meet another woman, Mother Kirk.
Both John and Mr. Virtue are sitting there by the canyon trying to decide what to do when they hear this voice kind of behind them. You have neither of you any chance at all unless I carry you down.
She is Christianity, traditional. And she says, you cannot do it yourself. I have to help you. Mm-hmm. The moment he decides to live virtuously, he's still not quite there. It's a step. They become friends, actually, but it doesn't help him cross this canyon, and he cannot do it of his own effort.
And Virtue here is actually a barrier because Virtue turns and says, oh, it's you, Mother Kirk, is it? And added in an undertone to John, I have seen her about the cliffs more than once. Some of the country people say she is second-sighted, and some that she is crazy. And so Virtue, again, his whole thing was to do this on his own. He had to walk. He had to do his 30 miles. And Virtue is here a barrier to John getting to the island, to crossing the canyon, because Mother Kirk is offering to do it for him, to take him down to the bottom.
It was surprising to me that Virtue is a hindrance. Mm-hmm. But it's true, they kind of parallel together because they have taken different roads till now. But anyway, Mother Kirk tells a story. In essence, it's a Genesis story, but set inside this context of this landlord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, landlord lived in this land, loved it. It was rich and fertile and wonderful, but he wanted others. He wanted people to share it with. He wanted people to love. And so he decided, you know what? I'll get some tenants. I'll hire some tenants. I'll bring them here and they can share this land with me. Now, the land was so big that just, a couple tenants couldn't do it. But his idea was he would start with a pair of tenants, a husband and wife, and then they would have kids and then they would expand. And eventually the whole land would be fertile and fruitful and good. Well, within the land, though, there was something that was bad. This was the mountain apples. These were poisonous apples. And there was one poison apple tree right in the middle of where he was going to put his new tenants. And he said, basically, well, great, this will work well. They need to learn to not eat these when they're out in the rest of the land. So we'll have this one here. I'll explain it to them. And that'll be kind of the one rule. Well, those of us who have read Genesis know this didn't go well. So the woman ends up eating it. She talks her husband into eating it. And there is a massive earthquake. And this is where the canyon appears. And we learn from Mother Kirk that in her language, this has a different name. She calls it peccatum Adae, which in Latin is the sin of Adam.
The next chapter is called The Self-Sufficiency of Virtue. Mother Kirk says, I can take you across. I can take you right now. And they say, no, thanks. We'll find another way. Why do you suppose that is? Was it just because they'd heard of her? Is that the reasoning behind it? This caption is that fear is too suspicious of such simple help.
I think there's some of that. I mean, she certainly represents Christianity. She represents the church in its fullness. But on another level, we can only receive and experience the church in its fullness by means of grace. And grace is a pure gift. A gift is always suspicious, and a gift is always humbling. And virtue in its own right is not usually very good at being humbled. Virtue and pride tend to go together more than virtue and humility. And so I think it's just an unwillingness and inability to receive the gift. This has to be given and it has to be received, and they're just not willing to receive it.
Well, John asked her some questions about the rules, actually, before they move on. And, what does this have to do with the card of rules? And she says, everything. In a country where all the food is more or less poison, because these mountain apples have spread everywhere, but some of it very much less than more. You need very complicated rules indeed to keep healthy. Says these are for your own good, and virtue's ready to go.
Yeah, I'm done. He is going to explore to the north. And so the two of them start working northwards, and she's pretty understandable. She says, "It'll do you no harm to try," answered Mother Kirk, "and I should not wonder if you find a way down. Getting up the other side is another question, to be sure, but perhaps we shall meet again when it comes to that."
Next up, they meet Mr. Sensible. Very appropriate.
Mr. Sensible is fantastic. By fantastic, I mean awful.
He's pompous.
He totally is. And if you want to talk about quotes and rabbit trails, he can't speak a line without throwing out a quote from somebody in the past, usually in French, Latin, Greek, German. I mean, he does it all, and Lewis doesn't translate any of these.
Sometimes he puts them together. That's when I gave up. Like, no, I'm not looking that up.
I know the one you're talking about, where he crams the Latin and the Greek together into one.
Yeah. This book is beyond me in many ways, but there's such good stuff in it. So he hosts them, he brings them in and talks a lot about himself and how he sustains his own self and everything's from his own garden and all this. And then he has a servant named Drudge, who he treats horribly.
Oh, he's terrible to Drudge. He's very kind, at least superficially kind, to these guests, and he's very proud of his radishes that he says he grows in his garden. But yeah, he's making Drudge do all the work. Drudge is doing everything. And it's interesting, really interesting. While they're talking, he makes the mistake of dropping a line from Aristotle. He starts talking about the golden mean, and Mr. Virtue perks up because Mr. Virtue knows Aristotle.
That's his area.
And he says, "Mr. Sensible, I think you've got that wrong, because I too have read Aristotle, and there is no extreme when it comes to goodness. That's not what the golden mean means. You can be as good as you want infinitively. You can be as good as you want. That's not where the mean comes. And Sensible shuts it down immediately. Like, well, I'm sure you're right. You're more up to date. He's not interested in actually having a discussion. He's just throwing out these platitudes and these lines that he's inherited over time.
He's very much not interested in traveling. His only fear in hosting them is that they'll ask him to come with them. No, we weren't thinking of that. Like, oh, no problem then. And he's not a fan of reason. Because John, every time he meets somebody, John asks about the island and question, do you think there's a landlord? He's really a seeker in this. He's looking around for different arguments and trying to find something or some things to hold on to. But here, Mr. Sensible says, reason. Oh, do you mean the mad woman who goes riding about the country dressed up in armor? She is not reasonable to him. He is far too sensible for that.
Well, eventually they get to actually eat, and the guests are worried, but it turns out the dinner's pretty good. But they also learn that this isn't from his garden. He's apparently knows a lot of people, and they talk about how, like, the meat came from somebody, the sherry came from somebody. So all these different things, he didn't produce any of them. He didn't provide any of it, but they were able to feast really on sort of the leftovers and the gifts that have come from the past and from other people. And he pulls out big names throughout all this. Turns out Mr. Sensible was not the original owner of the house. He mentions Epicurus, he mentions Horace, he mentions Montaigne. These are great writers and thinkers of the past, and a lot of the good stuff that Mr. Sensible has is left over from when they owned the house.
It's very much, I think, the copy of a copy of a copy. So Epicurus had thoughts and statements, and Mr. Sensible kind of sifts up all these things, but he loses the content behind them. He doesn't even care. Again, John asked about the landlord, and Mr. Sensible's answer is, no part of our nature is to be suppressed, least of all a part that has enshrined itself in beautiful traditions. The landlord has his function like everything else and is one element in the good life. One element. So he's not willing to really commit to anything in particular. He just sifts it all together.
As long as Drudge is doing the work. So John gets cold in this house. They go to bed and John is cold and he decides, well, I better get up and start walking around. It's coming on the morning and he goes out and he finds Drudge just sifting through the dust. There is no garden here. The few radishes that they're able to grow, there just ain't much. And apparently that's all Drudge gets to eat, is what comes out of this worthless garden. And he asks if he can accompany them. He wants to give notice and leave. And they say, sure, you can come with us. And so he decides he is going to go with John and Virtue when they leave Mr. Sensible's house. Mr. Sensible is not cool with this.
He's going to move. He's going to mechanize his servants so that he doesn't have to rely on anyone. It's funny because he didn't want to leave at all, but as soon as the servant's gone. Well, before they leave, though, Drudge tells John about the landslides. Because Mr. Sensible's house is very close to the edge of this Grand Canyon. And he talks about how the canyon's getting wider. I mean, the canyon's named the sin of Adam. And he says, yeah, some of the owners of this house, they died in those landslides. So this has some danger to living so close to the canyon.
There's one other passage here I want to talk about, because when Drudge gives his notice, he basically says, well, you haven't thought about how this is going to affect me. And Virtue has a code. And he says, no, I hadn't thought about how that would affect you. I am willing to stay here and serve you. Well, that doesn't go well. Mr. Sensible does not like Virtue. He's not going to get along with him, and so he ends up turning it down. But they end up having this conversation where Virtue is turning back on Mr. Sensible these things he said that, he didn't need. And Sensible is saying, well, of course I need some wealth. Of course I need some health. Of course I need a servant. These were all things that he just took for granted about his theory of life. And this next line is probably the line that has stayed with me the most since I first read this book. This line right here. Your art, then, said Virtue, seems to teach men that the best way of being happy is to enjoy unbroken good fortune in every respect. They would not all find the advice helpful. I love that, because this is what you see everywhere. This is my big problem with kind of bro science. This is my big problem with all the people that talk about, just assert your will on this and make it happen. Well, yeah, that can work if you have unbroken good luck. But, if you're born with cystic fibrosis, that just ain't going to happen, right? There are bad things that happen. But if you happen to be fortunate enough to have nothing but good luck, sure, make the life the way you want it. And this is, I think, just a wonderful explanation of that. And so I love this passage very much.
So we move on northward along the canyon. And this one, Lewis references Aristotle, Milton, Pascal, I.A. Richards. I mean, the man just read so much and incorporated so much. But they head north.
Mm-hmm. John struggles here because he is soft. But Drudge and Virtue, they help him until they come to the 3 pale men.
So you will have to help me with the 3 pale men because I actually looked them up and I was still confused.
I will help you with the 3 pale men.
There is Mr. Neo-Angular, Mr. Neoclassical, and Mr. Humanist.
So the neo means new, and so let's start with neo-angular. This is a pun and a pretty bad one. Remember, the Church of England is the Anglican Church. And so angular is kind of like Anglican, but it has this concept of sharpness, of pointiness, of a sudden turning. And so Mr. Neo-Angular is actually a description of a certain kind of Anglican, something called an Anglo-Catholic, and particularly a very stern Anglo-Catholic. It's the idea of somebody who is so attached to kind of the forms and rules of Christianity that they've lost the love, they've lost the compassion, they've lost the personal experience on it. And you see this in sort of the first interactions that Virtue has with him. Virtue says, "I understand you very well. May I shake hands with you?" "Can it be," said the other, "that you are one of us? You are a Catholic, a scholastic?" "I know nothing about that," said Virtue, "but I know that the rule is to be obeyed because it is a rule and not because it appeals to my feelings at the moment." "I see you are not one of us," said Angular, "and you are undoubtedly damned." I mean, it's a very harsh approach. But even with this, again, he is a steward. He's not a very good one, but he is a steward, and so he feels it is incumbent upon himself to share his food with these travelers that come by. So that's neo-angular. Neoclassical is exactly that. It's kind of this weird rebirth of the classical thing. It's sort of a post-Renaissance neoclassical, so it's classicalism, but without the heart, without the soul, without the trueness of it. And then humanism is humanism that comes kind of out of the Enlightenment, and is another philosophical passage.
Well, it's true for all 3 that they don't have the heart. The angular, he's going to share his supper, but because he must, it is his duty and obligation. There's no generosity or hospitality in it. That's true for all 3 of them.
Well, and it explains why the 3 are together, what they have in common, because they've got a lot that they disagree about, but their single great thing they have in common is hatred. They are combined in a uniform hatred of Mr. Halfways, that guy that was singing that actually John kind of liked. He actually got a picture of the island when this guy was singing.
It was pretty.
Yeah. This middle road, though, this Halfways, that's not what these 3 men are about. These 3 men are all about extremes in their various way. They are very proud of it, and that's why they have come to this barren land, this cold land in the north, with this plan to build up a civilization here. It's ridiculous. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And we see as that pans out over these next couple chapters.
They're also starving.
Mm-hmm.
They have like nothing, and they're pale because they're unhealthy. But the caption from Lewis is John travels into sterner regions of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Angular, I have to say, goes back to the SNL skit from long ago. Dieter,
Sprockets.
You are beautiful and angular.
Now's the time on Sprockets when we dance.
Exactly.
It's so good.
They don't dance at all.
Not the pale men. So John is exhausted, and he is too weak to continue moving north, but Virtue and Drudge are both strong. And so they decide they are going to keep moving. And so John hangs behind with the gloomy neo-angular because it's his duty. But eventually, Virtue comes back. Drudge is no longer with him, but Virtue comes back, and he says, I have stories, I can tell you where I've been, and I've brought food.
Virtue went and met Mr. Savage. He's not even a Mr., just Savage.
Savage.
He went to the furthest north. I mean, about as close to Tasmania as you can get on the map.
That's right. Along the way, they meet some other people. They meet the black and red dwarfs, a totally different race. So these aren't humans either. There are black and red ones, and these are fairly obvious references to, like, the red dwarfs are Marxist. I think it calls them the Marxomani, which is, again, a funny pun because that combines the Marcomani that Marcus Aurelius fought against with Karl Marx. So the Marxomani. Drudge joins them. That's home for him. And so that's why he doesn't come back with Virtue.
Virtue phrases it very brutally, though. I thought Drudge had died. He's like, that was there. I lost Drudge. Like, oh, no. But no, he wanted to stay.
Yeah. These are his people. He's going to drudge with them. But the dwarves do let Virtue go all the way up to Savage, and Savage is just a Viking barbarian in a hall. He describes this big room that looks like a barn, and Savage is reciting the Eddas. Oh. He is speaking them out. I actually did this exact quote when I was talking about Fenris. It's just a different translation where he says, East sits the old in an iron forest, feeds amidst it Fenris children. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did that exact quote when we were talking about Fenris. And this is what we have up here. And so this is a land of power. So the Savage and his people are going to just take and consume, because if there are no gods, if there is no landlord, they are going to take and conquer. They're going to wipe out the pale men. They're going to wipe out everyone, and they are going to take and own.
They call it master morality or violence. And it's strange. Virtue actually says he thought about staying. Why is that? Just because he hadn't found something that satisfied?
If there is no landlord, if there is no God, there's actually some pretty sharp logic to this. This is the philosophy of Nietzsche. This is the philosophy of power and will. And again, if there's no fundamental reality in terms of morality, then all there is will and power. And so Virtue has often been attracted to that, and in many cases has fallen prey to it. And this is how you get fascism.
Nihilism is the other word. A lot of isms in this book.
Mm-hmm. Well, Savage lets Virtue leave, and he even gives him food. So the food that Virtue takes back to the Pale Men comes from Savage, mostly because he wants an actual fight. He doesn't believe the Pale Men are going to put up much resistance. And it is fascinating what the Pale Men, how they respond to this when Virtue gets back. The title of this chapter is called Fool's Paradise, and the three Pale Men respond in very different ways. Angular wants to meet Savage. In many ways, he's a kindred spirit. No love, no mercy, no compassion, but rule, order, strictness. Humanists believe they will overcome him with their intelligence. They're so smart, how could they lose to these barbarians, despite the fact that there's an army and they have none? And then Classical believes he just made it up and it was a dream.
It drives me nuts how he says it. He says, if Mr. Virtue will not be offended, I would suggest that he dreamed the whole thing. I mean, that's very offensive.
Yeah. I don't mean to be offensive.
No offense, but that drives me crazy. That's offensive.
Well, John and Virtue are not going to hang around for this, and so they leave. And we move into the 7th book, southward along the canyon. So the full trek thus far. So we started in the far east. We have moved west because John is trying to get to this island in the far west. We have gotten stuck at the Grand Canyon. So they have now gone north as far as they can go. And Virtue also found that there was no descent into the canyon up north. Mm-hmm. And now they are going to turn southward.
And this one is titled Virtue is sick. He's more than sick. He is devastated. He has lost his way in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And John becomes the leader here, which is strange because he's always been the seeker and following. And sometimes he'll leave people and strike out on his own, but he's never led somebody else. Here, he acts as a true friend to Virtue, and he leads him.
He takes Virtue in hand, and the way they go. And John has some skills. He was a farmer's son, and so he is able to find some food for them to eat and keep them going. But as you say, Virtue is broken and keeps getting sicker and sicker, and he stops talking. He goes fully dumb, fully mute. He will not speak. And John just leads them along and leads them along the main road. They pass by Mr. Sensible's house. It's empty. He's gone. And they keep going south, and then they are welcomed finally by Mr. Broad. If neo-angular is an example of one kind of Church of England Christian, Mr. Broad is an example of another, and not just the Church of England, but Christians in general. And so Mr. Broad is kind of a anything goes sort of guy. If Sensible is sort of a anything goes to make me happy kind of deal, Broad is you all believe whatever you want, and it'll just work out.
And he knows everybody. He's like, oh, Savage, dear man, I should go see him. Mr. Savage, dear man, the one who wants, blood and violence. Like, I should go visit him. And
he's very broad.
He's very broad. He's very kindly in general. It's a general kindliness. He doesn't truly know anybody, but he has met them and he's fond of them.
But as you were saying earlier, John asks everyone the same questions. Is the island real? And can you help me get to it? And it becomes apparent that this man cannot help him get to the island. And so he doesn't stay at Mr. Broad's house for long. He asks, is there anywhere else I can go? And he says, well, Mr. Wisdom's house is a little bit further south. And the journey continues, and he takes Virtue with him, and they go down to the house of Mr. Wisdom.
With Mr. Broad, he drives me a little nuts, actually, because he says things like, the seeking is the finding. They're very not useful. They sound nice. But what do you do with it? And Virtue right now, his friend is sick and struck deaf and dumb. But yes, they progress to Mr. Wisdom, the House of Wisdom. And that sounds good.
It does sound good. And this, though, was a fascinating thing that took me a while to realize. This is not the end. Normally, in an allegory, when you get to a place like the House of Wisdom, you're there. Right? You're about to get the answers. It's all about to wrap up. But this is earthly wisdom. This is not the wisdom of God. This is not true wisdom. And he can learn things by it, but it's not going to get him the answers he wants. Now, wisdom believes it will, and wisdom tells him full stop, yes, I can cure your friend if he can be cured. And Virtue comes in, and John goes to sleep, and some fascinating things happens in the House of Wisdom.
The caption, you'll like this, from Lewis, is John takes up the study of metaphysics with wisdom. He's also visited, I think before his first lesson, he goes to sleep and he is visited by a woman named Contemplation.
I love this. And this is in the moonlight. He's visited by Contemplation in the moonlight. And she says, kind of come with me. And he says, well, I can't. And he's like, no. It's the moonlight. Jump. And he can fly. And so he goes across the canyon by moonlight, by the power of contemplation. And he's able to go basically right up to the island. He can't see it, though, but in some ways that makes it feel even more real. So this desire, this longing is very strong. And then he wakes up in bed.
She does indicate to him that he'll learn more as he practices. So in this, she says, when you have learned to fly further, we can leap from here right to the island. But for this night, it is enough. She indicates that this will happen again, and he'll get better at it. He'll get better at drawing close to the island, at least in the moonlight.
Mm-hmm. Over these next several chapters, there's a lot of discussion with Mr. Wisdom. A lot of philosophy gets thrown out, but in the next one, This Side by Sunlight, John learns that he's actually at the bottom of the canyon. This canyon he's been trying to cross, he's at the bottom, but he still can't cross it. There is still a gap. There's still a chasm that's too wide for him to jump over. So he is still though he's closer to the island than he's ever been, he is still as far as he's ever been because he cannot pass further. And then we move into several chapters where wisdom does some philosophizing at John. We have one chapter titled Wisdom Exoteric. So this is meant for kind of the general public, everyone. And then the next chapter is Wisdom Esoteric, which is meant for sort of special groups. In the exoteric chapter, I tried to summarize this in my own mind of what he was really saying, because it's thick and it's dense and there's a lot. But I think what he was trying to say, what wisdom was saying, is that wanting is better than having, which I don't think is true. And John knows in his bones that it's not true. But I think that's what wisdom is kind of preaching here. Did you get anything else out of that chapter?
Well, I have these helpful captions. I don't think I could read this book without these captions. But for the exoteric one, philosophy says that the existence of God doesn't actually answer the question, any questions, that there are still questions. It's this iteration where it's just another layer of things. It also says philosophy will not explain away John's glimpse of the transcendent.
Exactly.
That's evident here as well. The desired, the true desire, that sweet desire is real just because it is never experienced. Wisdom says you can't have it here. And it's interesting because wisdom has a lot of kids. And they're all here and they're all learning. And they talk to John. And one of Wisdom's sons says, he doesn't seem upset about it. But he says, it is not desired that my father's doctrine of wisdom kills. It is only hope. Mm-hmm. To me, hope is the thing, the key thing. The hope of this island has been what's driven John on from the beginning. Mm-hmm. He's come to wisdom for hope to die.
Oh, and I'm so glad you brought this up because this is a perfect example of the difference between Christian divine wisdom and earthly philosophical wisdom. So hope, let's go to that character specifically. As Christians, Paul teaches us that there are 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and love, right? And so hope is unquestionably a good. It is one of the theological virtues to any Christian. If you're a Greek, though, where you've come across hope is in the story of Pandora's box. Remember, Pandora, this beautiful woman, her name means all gifts, was created as a curse to mankind. Because after Prometheus gave mankind fire, the gods were mad, and so they gave them Pandora to curse men. And they sent with Pandora the famous Pandora's box, or the jar, that she took with her, that they were never supposed to open. Of course, they opened it, and all the evils of the world fly out. Only one thing is left in that jar. It's hope. Now, we, from a Christian standpoint, can say how wonderful. We still have hope left behind. But remember, in this story, what's in the jar? All the evils of the world, including hope. And so is hope really a good thing? Not necessary to the philosophical mind. And this speaks that to the philosopher, hope must die. And that is diametrically opposed to what we think as Christians. And this carries through even into modern day. For those of you who have watched the fine show Ted Lasso, lots of swearing, there's a phrase they talk about for sports fans. It's the hope that kills you, right? It's the hope that keeps you stringing along and just keeps hurting you year after year when your team fails.
I mean, you're talking about the Mariners, right?
I am a Mariners fan. So I have to fight this one.
I'm so sorry, Stevie.
But I think he's doing just such a masterful job in this book of highlighting that difference. And this carries on into that wisdom esoteric chapter where it's talking about the specific stuff, because you said wisdom has a lot of children here. And again, as biblical people, we know the line, wisdom is justified by all her children. Well, we're going to see earthly wisdom's children here, and we're going to see whether the father is justified. And spoiler, he is not. And so there's this wonderful passage. This is another passage by Moonlight where John gets called out and he ends up playing with the children of wisdom.
And they're kind of a mess.
Every one of them. They all have names. And again, it's an allegory. And so part of the puzzle is putting these together. I'm just going to read them. The names in this chapter are Marx, Spencer, Spinoza, Steiner, Kant, and Bossuet. And we won't go into each of those individually, but they each have a philosophy. They each have a worldview. And the games that are being played, the food they're eating, what they're doing is, one, a mockery of their father, but two, it speaks to their worldview and kind of what they think. And where this gets so good is in the next chapter, they won't admit they were there. John tries to hint like, hey, weren't you playing last night in the garden? And they are appalled and shocked. And again, it speaks to the brilliance of C.S. Lewis, because some of this stuff is just funny, because one of those was Kant, but they just call him Immanuel because it's Immanuel Kant. And this line is great. Immanuel indeed admitted as speculative truth that there were such things as dreams, and that he conceivably dreamed himself. But then he had a complex proof, which John never quite grasped, that no one could possibly remember a dream, and though his appearance and constitution... I mean, if you've ever read Kant, he's impossible to understand. People love him. I mean, he's a brilliant, but he is so dense and thick. And even Lewis thought he was dense and thick. So this off line that he had this proof that John never could understand, that is so in line with Immanuel Kant. The next chapter, or the final chapter in the House of Wisdom, is just entitled More Wisdom. And again, a sort of more pontificating from Mr. Wisdom. And again, I tried to sort of sum this up. Near as I can tell, the whole point of the House of Wisdom is kind of that you can do it yourself. It's sort of all about self-actualization. The more you learn, the more you study, the more you know kind of your body and your spirit, you can do things with both of them, and you don't really need anything else. So sort of what I took out of it.
And that it doesn't fully satisfy, because all of wisdom's children go looking for something else.
Great point.
And so from this point, virtue is healed. Wisdom says, hey, he's better. And he comes staggering out towards John. And it says he's walking almost as if he's blind. He's very weak, but he has conviction again, although it's altered. But he has this conviction that he must go on, kind of like he did at the beginning, 30 miles a day. This one, he has to continue because wisdom has given back the rules, even though he doubts all of it entirely. It's kind of a both and. It's very confusing, but he is compelled forward.
And you also, as I was reading this, get the sense that he believes existence to be flat out evil, that he hates that he's alive, but he can't kill himself. That would be against the rules. But what he can do is push himself as far and as fast and as dangerous as is possible to do. And John is trying to talk him out. He got a very different thing from these conversations, but virtue is not listening and says, I didn't mean for you to come with me. And in fact, he tries to stop him. He'll throw rocks at him as John is following him. But John, to his credit, keeps following virtue, but virtue keeps slipping further and further into the distance.
Yeah, John was ready to stay at the House of Wisdom, and virtue is out. He says, body and mind shall pay for the crime of their existence. He's into this idea of self-torture. And if he can drive himself hard enough, he'll have paid for kind of the sin of existing. It's very bleak. And this is when wisdom said he's cured.
Yeah.
That bothers me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy your misery.
And he drives his friend away.
And this is really where I felt the story, it picks up pace here.
Yeah. Because you jump out of all the different philosophies and things I haven't read or read just a little bit about, or they're mentioned by name, people. Like it's overwhelming, but really interesting. And it gives John these pieces. And honestly, I really like him as the idea of a seeker, where he takes these kind of nuggets from each of them, but the nuggets still aren't the answer. And so here it's his friendship, it's his fellowship that drives him forward. He does not abandon his friend, even when his friend chucks stones at him. But they do get further and further apart.
But then a new character pops up. This strange man that John doesn't know. It says, a man was descending where virtue had gone up. Hi, shouted the man. Your friend has gone on. Surely you will follow him? "He is mad, sir," said John. "No madder than you, and no saner," said the man. He's very cheerful. "We will both recover if only you will keep together." "I cannot get up the rock," said John. "I will give you a hand," said the man. And he came down till he was within reach of John, and held out his hand. And John grew pale as paper, and nausea came upon him. "It's now or never," said the man. Then John set his teeth and took the hand that was offered to him, and he gets pulled up the mountain.
The caption is John would turn back. He was ready to go back to wisdom. Christ forces him on.
Yes. So this is we have grace. He could not do it on his own, but this gift that he didn't even want, but that he needed, came to him, and John finally accepts some grace, and it helps him and takes him up the mountain.
Oh, but he's so not happy about it. He's all angry. He's like, that fellow has left me in a nice fix. He helped him up the mountain, up these cliffs he couldn't have done himself. And John just feels stuck. Well, where do I go now?
And I love this because then he asks for help. It says, in the bitterness of his soul, he looked up again saying, "Help, help, I want help." And then he realizes what he's doing, and he is furious because John realizes he is praying, and he is angry about that. And this so lines up with C.S. Lewis's experience, where he really felt like he was hunted by God. He did not want to find him, did not want him to exist, did not want him to bother him, but he just kept getting cornered. And here John is expressing this just fury over the fact that he was praying. But John's been talking to smart people, and his mind has expanded, and he gets some comfort when he realizes that even a lot of these people that don't say they believe in God still speak in metaphor. And so he's okay, because this is clearly just metaphor, and he feels better for a little while. And it's interesting here that this is where John starts to sing. We start to see poetry working its way into the book. And this is another part of this book I think a lot of people have trouble with. This, in my mind, is C.S. Lewis at his most, trying to be like George MacDonald. Because this is how George MacDonald writes. He writes with these just incredible stories that move on, and then these massive poems that'll take chapters. C.S. Lewis in his letters states he actually didn't really like George MacDonald's poetry. He kept trying to like it, but he's doing it here. And so I think that's fun. It's a fun little homage to his master.
Yeah, it's transitional for him. It says John finds his voice. I'll read the last just 2 bits of his song here, because I think it's, even if it's not the best song ever, he's able to sing. He's never, in this book, song has never been a part of him. It's coming out now. And it says, "Take not, O Lord, our literal sense, but in thy great unbroken speech our halting metaphor translate."
So good. And then the next chapter, the title, "Food at a Cost." Because what we see, and it really does seem to happen abruptly here, John is now interacting with who we later find is the landlord, right? Is God, who's coming to help him. This strange man comes and gives John food, which John needs to live and survive. But the obvious question that comes out of this, as the man explains, is, so you're saying your request for help is a metaphor? I'm giving you real food. Should this be a metaphor too? If this is real, don't you think your request for help is real as well? And that is a challenge.
Your life has been saved all this day by crying out to something which you call by many names, and you have said to yourself that you use metaphors. It says, but you must play fair. If its help is not a metaphor, the food, neither are its commands. If it can answer when you call, then it can speak without your asking. If you can go to it, it can come to you.
Leading us to the next chapter, caught. This is how Jack felt, and it's how John feels right here. John realizes in this chapter, to summarize it, that he knows there is a landlord. He must submit to the landlord, even, and this is the key point, even if that means giving up the island. So one of the things you can never accuse C.S. Lewis of is accepting God because he wanted to get heaven. He really didn't believe in heaven when he accepted God. He accepted God on his own terms because he felt reason and logic and his experience drove him in that direction. And that's what's happening with John here. Again, John wants the island more than anything, but he here realizes he must accept the landlord, even if that means losing the island. And that's a heavy place to be.
It says he was no longer free to spend his soul in seeking it and seeking the island, but he must follow whatever designs the landlord had for him. And the captions are interesting. It says, first, it's the terror of the Lord, the fear of the Lord, the terror of the Lord. And then where now is that sweet desire? But then he meets a hermit.
I love this. I smiled so much because the hermit, whose name is History, will help him. Go history! So much we can get from the study of history. And we finally have a guide who has answers, who has traveled, who has seen things. And as the guide is talking through John's questions and is talking about the worldviews of all these people who John has spoken with, he keeps saying, well, they've never traveled. This is the gift of history, is it lets us travel through cultures and peoples and beliefs and philosophies and compare them against each other and take the good and understand where they come from and where they're going and what they're leading to. And we learn a lot from the hermit, whose name was History.
Yeah, it says history has seen people like all the counter-romantics in many ages, across centuries. And it's funny, he talks about the tableland where Mr. Sensible lived and Mr. Savage. He asked questions about all of these. And he's like, they don't actually know. They can't even subsist. They get food from all these other places. They can't even provide for themselves, let alone help you.
Mm-hmm. And this chapter gets complex. There's a lot in these next few, but to summarize some of the things in here that are wonderful, he finally goes into depth about the rules and about what he calls the pictures. So the island is not the only picture that the landlord ever gave. The rules have a place and a reasoning behind them. And he does this wonderful explanation about this people that the landlord picked, that he gave the rules to. He talks about the shepherds. This is the people of Israel, the people that he gave the rules to as one way of knowing him and knowing the way to act in the world. But there were others that didn't have that. He talks about the pagans, people who had never heard of the landlord. And to these, he gave pictures. Sometimes it was an island, but there were other pictures that were given as well. Neither the rules are the landlord, nor are the pictures the landlord, but both of these can lead to the landlord and should be combined where possible. And it's a great description.
Well, and it's how Lewis reconciled mythology with the law. Because he loved mythology, and how could they fit together? Because he loved both pieces of it and how they actually fit together inside of his new belief system. And the caption here is that conscience and sweet desire must come together to make a whole man.
Yes.
It's that blending.
It's so good. And John is asking, well, who can bring these things together? Who can do it? And history has an answer. It says, the same who reconciled the shepherds and the pagans. But you must go to Mother Kirk to find him. So again, it's only God who can bring this together, can reconcile it. It's only Jesus. But we need to go, the church will help us find him.
It is interesting how many types of church there are represented in this story. So Mother Kirk is kind of the true church, the one that represents Christ alone. Broad religion was not it. The legalistic church was not it.
Puritan.
None of these things satisfy in the same way as Christ alone.
Mm-hmm. But each of these things can have pieces. Each of these things have truth. There's truth within all these different things. The mistake is to make a secondary thing a first thing. Christ alone is the first thing. It's all these secondary things that if you put that up above Christ alone, that's where you're going to run into trouble. I do enjoy that the hermit goes on. The hermit describes essentially a war between the landlord and the enemy. and he describes different tactics and how they go back and forth. And I won't go through all the tactics, but he does say at one point, and I love this line. Of course, the landlord was playing a dangerous game. Nearly all his games are dangerous, and the enemy managed to mix up and corrupt the new message as usual. So it's the idea that God is always working and he's taking risks, but he's doing it for a reason. And there's just some really beautiful descriptions in here that are worth doing. He talks a lot about the lady in medium avum. He talks about, which is essentially the description of Mary in the Middle Ages. Now, again, he was an Anglican and he was not a Mariologist. That's one of the reasons he never joined the Catholic Church. But he talks about how beautiful it was that you have these, barbarians in the Middle Ages, these savage people that treated women like trash, that they were just property and worthless. But then all of a sudden, this one lady got raised to almost divine level, and this brought them to Christ. He talks about these kinds of things. And again, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's worth reading because of some of these wonderful ways he tells these stories, the way really only C.S. Lewis can.
My favorite bit is short, actually. And he's talking about mistakes that different people have made. And one of the mistakes is they have no conception how slowly the landlord acts.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Bishop Barron say once that he's like, I don't know, it seems like God likes generational things and making processes over time. So we live one lifetime. God sees all lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So his processes can be much longer. How slowly the landlord acts.
All right. We're getting closer to the end here. John still has doubts, not that the landlord exists, not that he must submit to the landlord, but questions about whether the landlord really wants what is best for him.
Father, I am terribly afraid. I am afraid that the things the landlord really intends for me may be utterly unlike the things he has taught me to desire.
Now, though, that he has made this decision, it is time for him to act upon it. And we get to book 9, and we have not been reading all the stuff at the beginning of each of the books, but this one made me laugh out loud because there's 3. There's a quote from Langland that's, a stanza. There's a quote from George MacDonald from Lilith, which is beautiful and is a stanza. And there's the final quote that says, "You may as well come quiet. Police Maxim."
I laughed too.
He is caught. So he's in the cave with the hermit, and he encounters another form of contemplation. And this is a deeper, higher, purer form of contemplation. And he is, again, allowed to go across the canyon. He's allowed to see the island. But this is an interesting one because on the island, it starts to look like the mountains. The eastern mountains, way back where he started in Puritania, where the home of the landlord is. And so this wasn't necessarily a comforting experience. And he woke up and he's in a cave and it's black and he tries to get out. He is ready to leave. He's scared. He wants to run when somebody faces him down. Reason is back. Lady Reason won't let him just run. He has already thought through this. He already has an intellectual assent to what's going on here, and reason won't let him get away. And so he ends up turning, and he finds himself finally at the bottom of the canyon. And when he's there, he meets 2 people that we know, Mother Kirk and Virtue is there at the bottom of the canyon with him.
And Virtue seems happy. It's kind of the first time in this whole story Virtue seems happy. And Mother Kirk says that he has to do something. He has to jump. He has to dive head first. There's no doing it slowly. There's no half measures. Go.
And as he proceeds to do it, it describes wraiths of the different people that have been lecturing at him, Mr. Broad and Mr. Sensible and Mr. Enlightenment. There's voices coming to him as he's walking up, getting ready to dive. And he doesn't really want to dive, but fortunately, Virtue is with him. And Virtue talks him into it, says, "Let's go." And they dive into the pool exactly like he's supposed to.
Says it was not a good dive. But at least he reached the water head first. That was part of it.
And what an obvious reference to baptism, the idea of passing through the water, of essentially dying to self and then rising on the other side. This is the canyon that cannot be passed without death to self, without the help of grace, without the involvement of church. And so he goes down, goes through, goes across, and he comes out on the other side. And I love the title of one of these next chapters. It's, again, in Latin, Nella sua voluntura. In his will is our peace.
The captions here are wonderful from Lewis. He says, John comes where philosophy said no man could go. And the goal, once he gets there, is and is not what he had always desired. It's like, but not like. Mm-hmm. But he makes that there were so many characters in this book told him didn't exist, you couldn't get there, you might as well stay where you are.
When he comes up on this other side as really a new man, he's given a guide. He and Virtue are given a guide, and boy, this is a tongue twister of a name. Schlicksteinsauger. Is there a comment on this? I would be interested if you put a comment from Lewis.
What page are you on? Schlicksteinsauger.
Isn't that awesome?
There is no footnote.
All right. What I was able to find on this is at least pseudo Old Norse, and it might be something he kind of made up or got a little wrong. But near as I can tell, it means something along the lines of whetstone eyes or sharpening stone eyes. And so that makes sense if you look at this next thing. It says they called him that because his sight was so sharp that the sight of any other who traveled with him would be sharpened by his company. Seems a stretch, but let's go with it.
Whetstone eyes. Yeah. That's what I see here.
So why does he need a guide if he's already at the island?
Some clear vision. Come on. They get turned around. This was surprising to me. The guy tells them that this is round. You came all the way from the mountains in the east to the island in the west. You got to go back where you came from.
Mm-hmm. And I love this part. I really do. And this one kind of blew my mind when I read this, because what this means is that God was right there near Puritania. He was there. There was truth there. Now, his description of that land is horrible in that beginning. This guy that wants to torture everyone and, how kind he is to do it. But that's not the reality. The reality is that it is a God of love. It is a great landlord, and he was right there all along. And so now they get to go back to see him. They have to go back there, but nothing is the same on this journey home.
This is the regress, the return journey. The country will look very different on your return journey. They go back through many of the same places that they visited. They look entirely new. They have the clear vision now. Mm-hmm. And they have this guide to help them as well.
Although the road on the way back, they make a point of saying that it looks different, that it's twice as narrow and twice as dangerous. So just because they've gone through this change, just because they've submitted, doesn't mean that it's easy. So there's still a challenge on the way back. But each of these, there's several chapters in the Regress where it goes back through other places they've been, but we can hit these pretty fast. So there's a chapter where they go back to look for Mr. Sensible, but he's gone. Mr. Sensible wasn't enough of a reality to be seen anymore. He didn't have anything of his own. He was just parroting stuff other people said. They go back to a place called Limbo. This was formerly called the Valley of Wisdom. So this was where the House of Wisdom was. They have a fairly long digression on the black hole, and this I love, because the argument is that the landlord didn't make the black hole. The black hole is what's there without the landlord. And the mercy and gift and goodness of the landlord is that it's limited. That, yes, there's a black hole, but it is not allowed to take over everything, and it has borders. They go to Superbia, which Superbia is the land of pride, is what that means. And this was formerly where the three pale men lived. And so they were just proud. This was the land of pride. They go to Ignorantia, right? The land of ignorance. And this is where the clevers were, where the poetry and things were happening. And so those are places where he's been to before. But then there are 3 places that now come up that I'd like to spend a little bit more time on that are wholly new on this trip. There's Luxuria. What did you think about that one?
It's uncomfortable.
Totally uncomfortable. They find beings that are rotting in front of them, that are absolutely not human anymore. They're basically absorbing into the ground. But the strange thing is there's this very beautiful woman there who is going around kind of tending it and is offering things to drink. And they find one guy who still looks mostly human, but his fingers are starting to get kind of funky.
The woman has a cup, and clearly these people, these creatures are addicted to the cup, and they try to turn away from it, and they itch, and one resists, and it's like, no, give it to me. And the caption here is, lechery means not simply forbidden pleasure. So these things can be distorted. And the guide says, don't slow down, don't lag. This is a very dangerous place. You'd better come away. But this, you said earlier, John is soft, and he's looking around at these creatures desiring this cup of luxury. And once this man who resists it, it says, when she took the cup from his lips, he clung to it as a drowning man to a piece of wood. But at last he sank down in the swamp with a groan, and the worms where there should have been fingers were unmistakable.
Yeah. This was a haunting chapter, and certainly a lesson to, he made it to the island, but John is still tempted in this passage. And it's such a kind of a weak, shallow temptation, not in the sense, I guess, that it's weak, but he doesn't really want to be a part of this, but it's just so persistent. And this woman comes after him and after him and after him. But
yeah, it says she keeps pace with him, and she says, I'll not deceive you. You see there's no pretense. I'm not trying to make you believe that this cup will take you to your island. So that they've done away with those kinds of lies. But she says, I'm not saying it will quench your thirst for long, but taste it nonetheless, for you are very thirsty. Right. It's this idea that you can be drawn back into things even because they're not so bad. Mm-hmm. Just a small temptation. What's interesting is the guide lets her talk to him. He doesn't intervene. John has to resist himself. Mm-hmm. For me, it took me very much to The Great Divorce and The Red Creature as well. This isn't lust, this is luxury, but still that idea of temptation turning into this outward creature that starts to consume you. And like you said, these people are rotting away into worms. It is gross. But he does resist.
He does. And the next 2 chapters are awesome because there are dragons.
Yes, I love the dragons.
Each of the dragons, so there's a northern dragon and a southern dragon, and they each have kind of the flavor of the country. If you've been listening closely and if you read the book, you'll note that the north has this kind of coldness to it and this strength to it.
It's severe.
Severe. The south has sort of heat and fecundity and warmth and rot about it.
Good word.
And so you have I've been reading a lot of Lewis.
I know he's such good vocabulary. It's amazing.
And so here John and Mr. Virtue both are given a task. So John, who has been so soft, who has been such a devotee of luxury when he can get it, he is called upon to kill the northern dragon and to have some of the strength and toughness and coldness of that enter into him. Whereas Virtue, who has been so strong and severe, is called to slay the dragon of fire, the warm dragon, and to bring some of that kind of fire into him that was so cold. And so there's this wonderful balance that happens, and they are both successful in their quests.
I knew this book ended with dragons, and I was shocked how little pages were given to the killing of dragons because they each go battle one. And it turns out they don't need a lot of skill to do so. It's about the courage and the willingness to do it, to step forward and become stronger in these ways that each of them have been weak. Because they have kind of relied on each other for a little while, or stepped forward while led the other one while the other one was weak. Here they each had to go kill their own dragon and be made better by it.
Yeah.
Very good.
And so the dragons are dead. They are now back in Puritania. he stops, he sees his house where he grew up, and now they are to the brook, that same brook that old George had to pass over in such fear and terror, and now they must pass over it. And it's well written, and it seems to go in a flash because they spent so much time talking philosophy earlier in this book, and these scenes just roll right on by. The two know that this is a death as well. The two know that there is something lost by this choice, by moving over the brook, but they also know this is what they need to do.
So my favorite part of the ending, because they are back where he grew up. Okay, he had an affinity for this place because it is his home, his heart. A piece of his heart belongs there, and he thought he'd see his parents. He sees his old house, but it's all different now. It's all different. One, because he has clearer vision, but the people have also changed. The place has changed, and I love this. John says, "Be sure it is not for nothing that the landlord has knit our hearts so closely to time and place, to one friend rather than another, and one shire more than all the land." He sees the personal aspect of it, even though they've had this hard journey and so many failures and temptations along the way. And even here at the end, he's saddened. A piece of his heart is saddened by being back home, but it is different. But they're about to cross the brook. Mm-hmm. And he sees the intentionality of the landlord, of God the Father, and how he has cared for and loved and been loved by certain people, and he loves certain places. I love that.
I love it too. I am struck by how much wisdom is in this book, especially for a brand new Christian. He was brand new to this and wrote something that, I mean, I can and will spend the rest of my life thinking about. Was he right on every point in this book? Probably not. Again, new Christian, but his willingness to just say it and to share what he thought and what brought him to this, I appreciate, and I found that I really loved this book, which, can we move on?
Yes.
I am so excited about this because now we are going to talk about the afterword to the third edition. So I loved this book already. I enjoyed reading it, but I've heard that a lot of people don't like this book. I mean, people who have read it didn't like it very much.
It's hard.
Yeah, but I thought, well, okay, maybe that's just them. But then I read this. This is an afterword written by C.S. Lewis, again in the third editions, and I'll just read this first line. On rereading this book 10 years after I wrote it, I find its chief faults to be those two which I myself least easily forgive in the books of other men: needless obscurity and an uncharitable temper. C.S. Lewis wasn't a huge fan of this book. He was honest about it. Now, I don't think you can take from that passage and from the rest of this afterward that he didn't like this book and that he didn't stand by it. But he can see why people have their problems with it, and he had his problems with it. And I think these things speak so much to who C.S. Lewis was and the way his mind and his heart works. So, first of all, the needless obscurity, yeah, we don't even have to explain that.
So many references.
It clearly is, which at the time, I think when he wrote it, he thought, oh, this will be fun. And it can be fun to kind of hunt these down as clues and as a puzzle. But later on, after he stepped back from it, he realized, oh, yeah, that was hard.
Yeah, just not a common reader, not even even an advanced reader. You'd still not know all the references because it is so complex, and there is a beauty to that, but it is not automatic.
No, not at all. And I think the other point, the uncharitable temper, I just love he talks about this, because charity to one's enemies, right? To people who disagree with you. He didn't feel like he portrayed these people in as well a light or as good a light as he should have. I mean, that is Christianity penetrating into his work, into his brain, his thought, his soul. And the fact that he could recognize that, I just admire that so much. C.S. Lewis is my prime example for charitable reading, for trying to get what's good about anything you read, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, I have read him talking about books that he really didn't like, and was clear he didn't like the book, but there were good things in it. People would send him drafts of books they had written, and the man read them and gave notes. And he is so good at it because he doesn't pull any punches. He's very clear when things don't work, but he'll always say, but I liked this and this worked and this was sublime. I mean, he just is my model for charitable reading. And so the Afterword to the third edition, love it.
I have never read a book where I got excited about the afterword. This is the first time ever because it is good. His entire tone in the Afterword, he's still him. I mean, he dissects the definition of romanticism and what others could, understand it as currently, but what he actually meant by it. I mean, there's numbered lists. He's
he liked
still
number
himself.
2 of his 7 definitions.
But he wants to be clear about what he was thinking, and I so appreciate the comments, the summary line at the top of these pages, because there are ones that are very nebulous, and he calls out specific passages that he thinks he was far too severe. He wasn't being charitable, and he can see that in the reading, and the tone of this book versus the tone of the Afterword. It's so interesting to know that it's the same man writing them, and to know that that is what a decade of being a Christian can look like and sound like and feel like, and how he looks at the world. I mean, that clearer vision, this is 10 more years for him.
Oh, yeah.
And I really appreciated how he talked about it. And it has a warmth that I think a lot of the rest of this story doesn't have. But again, he's telling parts of his own story and philosophies that he learned about. And I do think that was a colder time for him.
He points out a couple things along those lines. One is he kind of assumed that other people would come to Christianity the way he did, and he realized, no, that's not a thing. People didn't follow these philosophical schools like I did to come to Christ. So he thought he was writing kind of a popular everyman kind of thing. John in here is not an everyman. It's C.S. Lewis. And he realizes that, okay, that's not going to click with everyone, but he kind of thought it would. He also talks about how the philosophical just milieu of the world changed very quickly. That when he wrote this, idealism was really the predominant philosophy that he was writing against, and that went away almost immediately. And so all of a sudden, a lot of the things that he was writing kind of against or about in this book weren't a big deal anymore. And again, he recognized that and speaks to it. I think that's all great. And then the other thing he talks about in here at fairly significant depth is, again, that idea of desire, of longing, and the idea that that is really something that can draw you forward to God, because nothing else is ever going to satisfy it. That hunger will always be there, and you can try and fill it with all these other things. And he's very clear. He tried to fill it with all these other things, and it just didn't work. And so it kept drawing him through. And we see this in his life. I mean, we see this in other places too. I mean, this is the beauty of the Divine Comedy, right? This idea of a love of a woman driving people, this desire to, because there's always a greater desire, and no love of any woman, even Beatrice, is going to be like the love of God. And so it's so good, and it makes me love the whole book even more. What a great book. I really enjoy it. I hope that even if you never read this, that you can see why some of us love it. And if nothing else, I hope this shows some of the heart of C.S. Lewis and what a great man, a great Christian, and a great writer he was. I think it's appropriate to end this with the quote he picked to start this off. This is directly under the dedication to Arthur Greeves. The line underneath that is, "As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country." It's from the book of Proverbs. And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.